What do Mighty Bomb Jack, released in North America in 1986, and Solomon's Key, released in 1987, have in common? If you're unfamiliar with each game, Mighty Bomb Jack is an arcade-like platformer, and Solomon's Key is somewhat of a puzzle game. If you guessed both games have nothing in common, a lot of people think both games suck. Both games happen to be developed by Tecmo, or if you guessed both games happen to be released on the Nintendo Switch Online, you're all wrong. The real answer is both games had manuals that were specifically written to confuse kids. Congratulations! How was any kid supposed to understand this back then? I think you actually needed to be the son or a daughter of a cartographer to understand. But no, in reality, each game is definitely quirky and very original, and Solomon's Key in particular is actually a really difficult puzzle game. A small reference aside, it makes me think of one of my all-time favorite logic platforming games, Suitehukun. Sute also combines precision platforming and logic puzzle solving. If you happen to be a fan of Solomon's Key, check out Suitehukun for sure. It was never released outside Japan for the Satellaview, but it was fan-translated into English. The real answer though is Mighty Bomb Jack and Dana apparently are from the same universe. That's right, they're possibly neighbors and eat dinner at each other's house night after saving the world and all of its kidnapped princesses and kings and queens and stuff like that. I read something in a 26-year-old FAQ from Game FAQs that tied the two together. Can we take a moment to appreciate how cool that is? 26 years old. Adam L., the FAQ author, wrote these guides a quarter of a century ago, and they're still being read today. Adam L., if you hear this over 25 years later, I hope you've had a happy life in that time frame. I think that's genuinely neat that something was preserved so long ago on the internet and it's still accessible nearly 30 years later. I stumbled upon what he wrote here in a mini guide about Mighty Bomb Jack, which sounded true on the same level as you could find Mew Under the Truck was true in Pokemon Red. He simply wrote, Bomb Jack's Key. Bomb Jack also appears in the game Solomon's Key. Check out that mini FAQ to see how. So naturally, I went over to the other mini guide to check. Had Adam L. never written this small reference, I never would have looked up Solomon's Key. It mentions, reach level 17 on your first life. Hit the gray unbreakable block on the far right side 11 times. Dana will transform into Mighty Bomb Jack. All the enemies in the room will transform into various bonus items. This is tough. Admittedly, I'm not great at this game. I did it earlier with save states, and some of the levels proved very tricky to not die on. In particular, level 17 is quite hard, so I'll share my strategy there where I didn't use save states at all. It just required using one fireball. I'm also wondering how this was discovered so long ago, as the way it's worded is both unclear, which is which block to hit, and the fact that Dana doesn't transform into Mighty Bomb Jack at all. But Mighty Bomb Jack does appear. Once you collect Mighty Bomb Jack, all the enemies turn into fairies. Hit in this context means to bonk your head also, which also provided earlier confusion. I tried hitting the right wall and hitting the block below. Also, the block being on the right side is not exactly the block that you spawn on, but the one up here, which changes the goalpost dramatically. The block you spawn on is much easier to quote hit, but the block above is much harder to bonk. I did confirm you have to do this without losing a life, which includes screen 17. If you die on this level and succeed post-death, Mighty Bomb Jack fails to appear. The other 16 levels I feel you can just save state through, as none were that tricky to eventually figure out. But for level 17 in particular, I spawned a block at the bottom and intentionally lured over 2 enemies to chase me and then jumped back up. From there, I snuck under the rotating fireballs and I used Dana's fireball to kill the other enemy out of sync, and quickly spawned 2 blocks to avoid the other enemies. This was really consistent and repeatable, and from there, I just made a bridge over to the block that you have to jump and hit 11 times. That's it! I really wanted to make this into a quick video, as growing up, I often checked game FAQs. Due to the wording, this really sounded like a Mew Under the Truck situation, and there was all kinds of pre-internet or early internet rumors back then that was just very hard to navigate. I found this extremely cool that it actually worked some 26 years later, and even hardcore speedrunners of the game didn't exactly know that this existed. What are some cool video game rumors that you remember that ended up being true? Thanks for watching!